German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has lost a no-confidence vote in Parliament, paving the way for snap elections. Hungary and Slovakia vetoed a proposal to impose EU sanctions on Georgian officials involved in the repression of pro-EU demonstrations.
President of the European Central Bank Christine Lagarde has warned of the potential effects of new US trade policies.
Russian President Vladimir Putin accused NATO nations of pushing Russia into its red lines in Ukraine. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has lost a no-confidence vote in Parliament. It's paved the way for national snap elections, with polls indicating Germany could be headed for a right-wing shift in power.
Gerade wurde es entschieden. Der Deutsche Bundestag hat dem Bundeskanzler Olaf Scholz mit 394 Stimmen das Vertrauen entzogen. Olaf Scholz hat damit die Vertrauensfrage verloren. Bundespräsident Frank-Walter Steinmeier hat nun 21 Tage Zeit, um den Bundestag aufzulösen und damit Neuwahlen den Weg freizumachen. Schon während der Aussprache im Bundestag herrscht Wahlkampfstimmung. Scholz und Wirtschaftsminister Robert Habeck verweisen auf Erfolge der Ampelkoalition. Oppositionsführer Friedrich Merz greift Scholz direkt an und verteidigt CDU-Wahlversprechen. Den Parteien bleibt wenig Zeit, um die Wählerinnen und Wähler von sich zu überzeugen. In knapp 2 Monaten, am 23. Februar, sind Neuwahlen. Dieser kurze Wahlkampf ist besonders hart für die Kleinparteien. Sie müssen Zehntausende Unterschriften sammeln, um überhaupt bei der Bundestagswahl antreten zu dürfen. Viele sind sich nicht sicher, ob sie das schaffen werden. Am 23. Februar werden die Wählerinnen und Wähler deswegen voraussichtlich eine kleinere Auswahl haben. Anne-Frieda Müller in Berlin für Euronews.
The no-confidence vote is only the 6th in the country's post-war history. Hungary and Slovakia vetoed a proposal to impose EU sanctions on Georgian officials involved in the repression of pro-European demonstrations. The sanctions were put forward by High Representative Kaja Kallas during a meeting of foreign affairs ministers in Brussels. Kallas told reporters that Georgia is currently not going in the right direction where candidate countries should be. Thousands of Georgians have been protesting in response to the Georgian government's decision to halt EU accession talks. But the suppression of the pro-EU demonstrations led to chaotic clashes in the streets and resulted in multiple arrests and numerous reports of injuries. Hungary, who is a close ally to the Georgian ruling party, had announced before the gathering that they would block any restrictive measures. Slovakia's Prime Minister Robert Fico often aligns with Hungary's Viktor Orban on foreign policy and was also expected to say no.
US President-elect Donald Trump's potential trade policies could negatively impact the EU economy. Speaking at a press conference in Vilnius on Monday, President of the European Central Bank Christine Lagarde said that it will continue to cut interest rates, but is worried about economic growth. As inflation continues to ease towards its 2% target, Lagarde explained that there are both upside and downside risks.
A downside risk might be some of the geopolitical developments, including, for instance, the change of the American policies in relation to trade.
These tensions could result in higher energy prices and freight costs. US President-elect Donald Trump campaigned on a pledge to impose tariff of 10 to 20% on all imports.
In his first public comments since fleeing Syria and being evacuated to Russia, former leader Bashar al-Assad says his departure was unplanned. The ousted Syrian president is claiming instead that his Russian allies decided to evacuate him from an airbase when it came under heavy drone attack. Al-Assad also attempted to cast himself as a brave leader who fought until the end as opposition fighters closed in on Damascus. His statement was published on the Telegram channel of the Syrian presidency. However, it is unclear who now controls the account. Al-Assad claimed that he never considered stepping down or seeking refuge, nor was such a proposal made by any individual or party. He now lives in Moscow with his family after being granted asylum.
Russian President Vladimir Putin accused NATO nations of pushing Russia into its red lines. In his annual meeting with defense officials, the Russian president implied the figurative point of no return may be reached by escalating the conflict in Ukraine.
США продолжают накачивать фактически нелегитимный правящий режим в Киеве оружием и деньгами. Отправляют наемников и военных советников и тем самым поощряют дальнейшую эскалацию конфликта. Доводят нас до красной черты, через которую мы отступать уже не можем. Начинаем отвечать, тут же пугают свое население, тогда еще в давние времена советской, сейчас российской угрозы.
Putin also voiced his concerns over the developments made by the United States regarding medium and shorter range missiles. He added that if the US were to cross this line, Moscow would lift its voluntary restrictions. The Russian president also applauded Russian forces for capturing 189 settlements this past year.
Finland is accelerating preparation for all potential conflicts, nuclear, hybrid war or even a full-scale invasion. It has a 1,300-kilometre border with Russia, although this has been closed for over a year after Russia sent over 1,000 migrants there to destabilise the country. Since then, Finland has been dealing with other warfare, such as the tampering of undersea cables, disinformation and the presence of so-called Russian shadow oil fleets which illegally transport Russian oil, contravening Western sanctions.
The Finnish border guard has been always an organization, a readiness organization, which has built its capabilities to operate in a situation like today. But of course, it is also true that, for example, the phenomenon of shadow fleet, phenomenon of GPS disturbance, and illegal immigration in the eastern borders are something that we have seen only in last years. We have seen, let's say, cable cuts, cable breakdown points, which are under criminal investigation. As I mentioned before, we also see a threat for an environmental accident in the Gulf of Finland, and one part of this is GPS disturbance, which can be seen especially in the eastern parts of Gulf of Finland.
Conscripts, which have long been part of Finland's overall security policy, are now training with the possibility that they could be defending the whole of Europe since the country joined NATO. Finland has been preparing for any war for several decades. The invasion by Russia in 1939 is something that Finns are constantly reminded of. And the key principle of this comprehensive security and defence strategy is deterrence. To deter any potential invader, in particular Russia, that this country is prepared, its society as a whole and military are well trained.
It's not aimed only towards Finland or the neighboring countries, but Russia is trying to destabilize the whole of Europe. So the whole Europe has to take this hybrid war seriously. And because Russia cannot pressure us by threatening in the way of conventional war, because we are all members of NATO, the hybrid war is the mean they use to threaten us.
Helsinki says it's now open to new EU defence spending, including defence bonds. The government says investing in European security fits in with the country's overall security strategy. Shona Murray, Euronews, Helsinki.
Ireland's Prime Minister Simon Harris has called Israel's decision to close its embassy in Dublin deeply regrettable. But he also said his government wouldn't change its position on how the war in Gaza is being fought. Israel announced on Sunday it would close its mission in the Irish capital because of what officials called extreme anti-Israel policies.
I will push back very strongly against any attempt by any country to misrepresent Ireland's position. Ireland is not anti-Israeli, but Ireland is absolutely anti the starvation of children. It is absolutely anti-killing of civilians, and is absolutely pro-peace, pro-international law, and pro-human rights.
Meanwhile, Israeli forces have continued to pound Gaza's largely isolated north as the Palestinian death toll approaches 45,000. One airstrike hit the Khalil Aweda school in the town of Beit Hanun and killed at least 15 people, according to nearby Kamal Adwan Hospital, where casualties were taken. And in Gaza City, at least 17 people, including 6 women and 5 children, were killed in 3 airstrikes that hit houses sheltering displaced people. Israel's military said in a statement that it struck a terrorist cell in Gaza City and a terrorist meeting point in the Beit Hanun area. The war in Gaza began after Hamas stormed southern Israel on the 7th of October last year, killing 1,200 people and taking around 250 others hostage.
France's Interior Minister Bruno Retailleau arrived in Mamoudzou, the capital of the French overseas territory of Mayotte, after the island was shattered by its worst storm in nearly a century. He told rescue staff that all means would be mobilized to help people, including by ship and military aircraft.
Le problème, c'est que si ces efforts sont dispersés et s'il n'y a pas une conduite logistique, coordination extrêmement robuste, tout ça sera vain. Voilà, ça c'est le job du préfet, de ses équipes, de chacun d'entre vous, et donc vraiment je compte sur vous. La tâche est difficile, il va y avoir du découragement, parce qu'il va y avoir beaucoup de fatigue.
The official death toll stood at 14 on Monday, but authorities at Mayotte fear hundreds and possibly thousands of people have died in Cyclone Chido. Entire neighborhoods have been flattened and public infrastructure like the main airport and hospital have been badly damaged, further complicating the response.
Euronews. The news